Captain Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bloodclaw, watching the holographic display with hungry eyes. His scaled fingers drummed against the command console as he studied the electromagnetic signature that had appeared on their sensors 3 hours ago. A human distress beacon, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies from the asteroid field near Kepler 442b. The message was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps, but Vexitar had learned not to question good fortune when it presented itself. The transmission claimed to be from a merchant vessel called the Prosperity, supposedly carrying rare earth metals and advanced technology from the inner colonies to the frontier worlds. According to the distress call, their hyperdrive had failed during an asteroid collision, leaving them stranded and defenseless. Vexitar's pack had been hunting in this sector for 6 months, preying on the steady stream of human cargo ships that moved through the trade routes. The humans were predictable in their weakness. Unlike other species, they actually responded to distress calls from strangers. They would risk their lives and ships to rescue people they had never met, from species they barely knew. It was a foolishness that the Krellian marauders had learned to exploit with deadly efficiency. The bridge crew moved around him with practiced silence. These were veterans, predators who had followed Vexitar through dozens of successful raids. His pack consisted of 6 destroyers, each one fast and heavily armed. They had perfected the art of the ambush, using fake distress signals to lure unsuspecting prey into carefully prepared killing zones. Lieutenant Scarth approached from the communication station, his claws clicking on the metal deck. "Captain, we have analyzed the human transmission. The encryption patterns match previous intercepts. The voice stress patterns indicate genuine panic. All technical specifications are consistent with a disabled merchant vessel." Vexitar nodded, satisfied. His pack had captured several human ships over the past year, and each victory had taught them more about their prey. They had recorded human voices in distress, mapped their communication protocols, and learned to replicate their technology signatures with frightening accuracy. The humans' own compassion had become the weapon used against them. "What of the cargo manifests?" Vexitar asked, his voice a low growl. "Extremely valuable, sir. Rare earth elements, quantum processors, and medical supplies. The ship's registration shows it belongs to the Terran Merchant Marine civilian ownership, minimal defensive capabilities." This was exactly what Vexitar had hoped to hear. Human merchant ships were lightly armed at best, relying on speed and the protection of patrol routes rather than heavy weapons. Their crews were traders and technicians, not warriors. The Krellian destroyers could easily overwhelm such a target, especially one that was already disabled. But the real prize would come later. Within hours, maybe days, other human ships would arrive to answer the distress call. They always did. Human rescue ships, patrol vessels, even private craft would risk everything to save strangers in distress. It was a weakness so profound that Vexitar sometimes wondered how such a soft species had ever survived long enough to reach the stars. "Deploy the pack in ambush formation," Vexitar ordered. "Full stealth protocols. I want every ship hidden among the asteroids before the first rescue vessel arrives." The crew moved with deadly efficiency. The 6 Krellian destroyers spread out. Through the asteroid field, their cloaking devices bending light and sensor waves around their hulls. Advanced dampening fields masked their energy signatures, while specially designed hull coatings absorbed active sensor pings. To any approaching ship, the asteroid field would appear empty except for the disabled merchant vessel broadcasting its desperate plea for help. Vexitar had chosen this hunting ground carefully. The asteroid field provided perfect cover for his ships while offering multiple escape routes if anything went wrong. The nearest human military base was weeks away at maximum speed, far too distant to interfere with his plans. By the time any significant force could respond, the Krellian pack would be long gone with their prizes. The waiting began. Vexitar settled into his command chair, watching the sensor displays for any sign of approaching ships. The fake distress, Call continued its endless loop, painting the picture of desperate humans slowly dying in the cold of space. Each repetition of the message was a lure, drawing compassionate prey toward their doom. 3 hours passed before the first response came. A burst transmission on the same emergency frequency, professional and calm despite the underlying urgency. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo hauler Lucky Strike. We have received your distress call and are proceeding to your coordinates. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. Hold on, Prosperity. Help is coming." Vextar allowed himself a predatory smile. The first fish had taken the bait. But he knew from experience that humans rarely traveled alone in dangerous space. Where one ship responded to a distress call, others would follow. He would be patient and wait for a full catch before springing his trap. An hour later, a second transmission arrived. "Merchant Vessel Prosperity. This is Dr. Elizabeth Santos aboard the research ship Endeavor. We are also responding to your distress call. Our medical facilities are fully equipped if you have casualties. We will arrive in approximately 3 hours." Perfect. 2 ships now, and from the transmission signatures, both appeared to be lightly armed civilian vessels. A cargo hauler and a research ship would be easy prey for his pack of destroyers. But Vextar's instincts told him to wait. Human rescue operations often involved multiple ships, especially when civilian vessels were involved. His patience was rewarded an hour later when a third transmission reached them. "This is Captain Maria Rodriguez of the passenger liner New Horizon. We have medical staff and emergency supplies aboard. All 3 of our ships will coordinate the rescue operation. Prosperity, stay strong. We're coming for you." 3 ships. Vextar's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. This would be their biggest haul yet. A cargo hauler, a research vessel, and a passenger liner meant hundreds of potential prisoners to sell in the slave markets, along with whatever valuable cargo and technology the ships carried. The profits from this single operation could fund his pack for months. The trap was set perfectly. 3 human ships would arrive within minutes of each other, their crews focused entirely on the supposed rescue operation. They would be spread out, vulnerable, their guards down as they rushed to save lives. The Krellian destroyers would emerge from hiding and surround them before they could react or escape. "All ships report ready status," Lieutenant Scarth reported from his station. "Weapons powered and targeting solutions prepared. The pack awaits. Your command, Captain." "Excellent," Vextar growled. "Remind all ships to target engines and communication arrays first. I want prisoners, not wreckage. Dead humans bring much lower prices than living ones." The holographic display showed the approaching human ships, their engine signatures bright against the darkness of space. They moved with purpose but without caution, their sensors focused on the supposed wreck rather than scanning for threats. It was exactly the behavior Vextar had come to expect from humans. Their emotions made them predictable. Their compassion made them vulnerable. The first ship, the cargo hauler Lucky Strike, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the asteroid field. Its sensors immediately began scanning the area, searching for the disabled merchant vessel. The ship moved carefully between the asteroids, following the beacon signal toward what it believed was a rescue operation. "First target has arrived," reported the weapons officer. "The cargo hauler is proceeding directly toward the decoy beacon. No sign they have detected our presence." Vextar watched the tactical display with growing anticipation. The human ship moved deeper into the asteroid field, completely unaware of the 6 predators waiting in the shadows. Its crew was probably already preparing rescue equipment, medical, supplies, and emergency repair materials. They had no idea they were flying into a carefully prepared ambush. The second ship, the research vessel Endeavor, appeared 20 minutes later. It took a different approach vector, moving more cautiously, as its advanced sensors swept the area. For a moment, Vextar worried that the research ship might detect something suspicious, but it continued toward the beacon without raising any alarms. "2 targets now in the kill zone," the tactical officer reported. "Both ships are proceeding, as expected. No indication they suspect a trap." The final ship, the passenger liner New Horizon, emerged from faster-than-light travel precisely on schedule. It was larger than the other two vessels, its hull gleaming with the paint scheme of a civilian transport company. Passenger liners were particularly valuable targets because they carried the wealthy travelers and important officials who commanded the highest ransom prices. All three human ships were now in the asteroid field, spread out in a rough triangle. As they approached the fake distress beacon from different angles, they maintained constant communication with each other and with the supposed merchant vessel, coordinating their rescue efforts with the efficiency that Vextar had learned to expect from humans. "All targets are in position," Lieutenant Scarth announced. "The pack is ready to decloak and attack on your command, Captain." Vextar stood slowly, savoring the moment. This would be remembered as one of the most successful raids in Krellian history. 3 ships, hundreds of prisoners, and cargo worth millions of credits, all delivered into his claws by human weakness and predictability. "Signal all ships," he commanded, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a predator about to feed. "Prepare to decloak. Target their engines and communications first. I want them disabled, not destroyed." The moment had arrived. 6 Krellian destroyers would emerge from hiding like striking serpents, surrounding the human ships before they could react. It would be over in minutes, another successful hunt by the most feared pack in the sector. Vextar raised his claw toward the command console, ready to give the order that would spring the trap. The humans had played their part perfectly, responding with predictable compassion to a cry for help. Now they would learn the price of such foolish kindness. "All ships," he announced across the pack communication channel. "Decloak and attack. Show these soft humans the price of their weakness." The bridge of the Lucky Strike hummed with quiet activity as Captain Sarah Chen reviewed the sensor data from the asteroid field. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency around the spacious command center, their movements betraying none of the tension that filled the air. To any outside observer, they appeared to be exactly what their ship's registration claimed: civilian cargo haulers responding to a distress call with nothing but good intentions and basic rescue equipment. Chen studied the tactical display with eyes that had seen far more combat than any merchant captain should possess. The electromagnetic signature of the supposed disabled vessel was clean, perhaps too clean. The distress call followed standard human protocols perfectly, but something about the voice patterns nagged at her experienced instincts. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the operations station. "We're reading one disabled vessel broadcasting on emergency frequencies. No signs of other ships in the immediate area." "No signs they want us to see," Chen muttered under her breath. She had been hunting pirates for 3 years, ever since the Earth Defense Force had approved the covert operation that transformed her dreadnought into an apparently harmless cargo hauler. The Lucky Strike was actually the UES Warhammer, one of the most advanced battle cruisers in the human fleet, disguised behind false hull plating and fake registration codes. The operation had been born from necessity and frustration. Human merchant shipping was under constant attack from pirates who used humanity's own compassion against them. Fake distress calls had become a favorite tactic, drawing rescue ships into carefully prepared ambushes. Traditional patrol methods had proven inadequate against enemies who could perfectly mimic human emergency protocols. So Earth Defense Command had tried a different approach. Instead of chasing pirates after they struck, they would anticipate the attacks and be ready when they happened. 3 specially modified warships had been deployed as bait, disguised as civilian vessels and equipped with the most advanced sensors and weapons that human technology could provide. "Captain," came a voice from the communications station, "we're receiving coordination signals from the Endeavor and New Horizon. Both ships report normal approach vectors and no signs of hostile activity." Chen nodded, maintaining her cover even though she knew every member of her crew was actually a combat veteran. The research vessel Endeavor was really the experimental, weapons platform UES Prometheus, equipped with prototype weapon systems that existed nowhere else in the human fleet. The passenger liner New Horizon was the heavy cruiser UES Retribution, its passenger compartments converted into fighter bays and additional weapon storage. All three ships had been specifically designed for this mission: hunt the hunters who preyed on human compassion. They had spent months developing their covers, practicing civilian communication protocols, and perfecting the art of appearing helpless while carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Update from Fleet Intelligence, reported the communications officer. Long-range sensors are detecting some interesting energy signatures in the asteroid field. Very faint, but consistent with cloaked vessels. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The trap was working exactly as planned. Somewhere in the asteroids ahead, pirates were watching three apparently defenseless human ships approach their carefully prepared ambush. What the pirates didn't know was that they had just surrounded themselves with some of the most dangerous warships in the human fleet. The plan had taken months to set up. Earth Defense Intelligence had identified this sector as a hunting ground for Krellian raiders, a particularly vicious pack that specialized in fake distress calls and slave-taking operations. The supposed merchant vessel they were supposedly rescuing didn't actually exist. The distress beacon was a fabrication, broadcast, from a concealed probe that had been deployed weeks earlier. Every detail had been carefully planned to appear authentic. The three approaching ships maintained civilian communication protocols, used standard merchant vessel identification codes, and followed exactly the kind of rescue coordination that real civilian ships would employ. Their sensor sweeps were deliberately limited to avoid appearing too sophisticated, while their hidden military-grade systems mapped every asteroid and energy signature in the area. "Captain Chen," came a transmission from the Endeavor. "This is Dr. Santos. Our medical team is standing by for casualty treatment. Do we have any information about the number of survivors aboard the Prosperity?" Chen keyed her response carefully, maintaining her role as a concerned cargo captain. "Negative, Endeavor. We're still trying to establish clear communication with the disabled vessel. Recommend we proceed with full emergency protocols and prepare for multiple casualties." The exchange was perfect theater, designed to convince any listening pirates that they were dealing with soft civilian rescuers rather than military hunters. Chen could almost feel the predators watching from the asteroids, probably congratulating themselves on finding such perfect prey. What the pirates couldn't detect were the modifications hidden throughout the three ships. The Lucky Strike's cargo holds had been converted into weapon bays, with retractable armor plating that could transform the vessel from merchant hauler to battlecruiser in under 30 seconds. Her crew wore civilian coveralls over military combat armor, ready to shed their disguises the moment the trap was sprung. "New contact on long-range sensors," reported the tactical officer. "Correction, multiple contacts. 6 vessels, destroyer class, maintaining stealth, but not perfect stealth. They're positioned in a classic ambush formation throughout the asteroid field." Chen felt the familiar pre-battle calm settle over her. This was what she had trained for her entire career, the moment when careful planning met deadly execution. The pirates had taken the bait perfectly, positioning themselves exactly where Earth Defense Intelligence had predicted they would. "Signal the other ships," she ordered quietly. "Code Yellow. All units prepare for immediate transition to combat status. Weapons and shields on standby, ready for rapid deployment." The bridge crew acknowledged with subtle nods and hand signals, their civilian facade never slipping even as they prepared for battle. Years of training had taught them to maintain their cover until the very last second, no matter how obvious the trap became. The three ships continued their approach toward the fake distress beacon, their movements deliberately cautious, but not suspicious. They maintained constant communication with each other and with the non-existent merchant vessel, playing their parts perfectly as concerned rescuers rushing to save lives in distress. "Captain," the sensor officer reported in a low voice, "I'm reading weapon signatures from the hidden contacts. Multiple missile tubes and energy weapons, all powered but not yet locked onto targets. They're definitely planning an ambush. Understood, Chen replied calmly. Maintain current heading and speed. Let them think they have us exactly where they want us. The irony was not lost on her. The pirates were using humanity's greatest strength against them, exploiting the fact that humans would risk everything to save strangers in distress. But they had made a fatal miscalculation. Earth's military planners had anticipated this exact scenario and prepared accordingly. The fake distress call had been designed not just to lure pirates into an ambush, but to test a new tactical doctrine. Instead of simply patrolling shipping lanes and responding to attacks after they happened, Earth Defense Force would anticipate pirate tactics and be ready for them. The three disguised warships represented a new kind of hunting pack, one that used the enemy's own methods against them. New Horizon reports ready status, came the communication update. Captain Rodriguez confirms all systems are prepared for immediate combat deployment. Fighter squadrons are loaded and ready for launch. Chen checked her chronometer. They were now less than an hour from the supposed disabled vessel, well within the killing zone where the pirates would spring their trap. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, both the pirates' plan and the hidden plan that would destroy them. Endeavor signals ready, the communications officer continued. Dr. Santos reports that all experimental weapon systems are charged and ready for field testing. Perfect. The research vessel's prototype weapons had never been used in actual combat, but their theoretical capabilities were impressive enough to make even veteran captains nervous. Today would provide the first real-world test of technologies that might revolutionize space warfare. The three ships moved deeper into the asteroid field, following the beacon signal toward their supposed rescue mission. Their formation was loose and apparently casual, the kind of arrangement that civilian vessels might use for a coordinated rescue operation. Hidden beneath the civilian facade, however, the formation was actually a sophisticated tactical deployment that would allow maximum firepower coverage once the battle began. Final approach vector confirmed, reported the navigation officer. We will reach the supposed location of the disabled vessel in 37 minutes. All ships are maintaining proper spacing for the operation. Chen nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. In less than an hour, this carefully planned operation would either succeed brilliantly or fail catastrophically. There would be no middle ground when warships shed their disguises and revealed their true nature. The pirates were probably feeling confident now, watching three apparently helpless civilian ships move directly into their trap. They had no way of knowing that they were actually positioning themselves to be surrounded by some of the most advanced warships in the human fleet. Captain, the tactical officer said quietly, long-range analysis confirms 6 Krellian destroyers in the ambush formation. Standard configuration, fast and heavily armed but not heavily armored. Perfect targets for our primary weapon systems. Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Krellian raiders were notorious throughout the sector for their attacks on human shipping. They specialized in slave-taking operations, selling their prisoners to the worst markets in known space. Today, they would finally face the consequences of targeting human civilians. The three ships continued their steady approach, playing their roles perfectly as the trap prepared to spring from both directions. In minutes, the careful deception would end, and the real battle would begin. Chen could hardly wait to see the look on the pirate captain's face when his prey revealed their fangs. The moment came with deadly precision. 6 Krellian destroyers materialized from the asteroids like striking serpents, their cloaking fields dissipating as weapon systems powered to full charge. The ambush formation was perfect, surrounding the 3 human ships with overlapping fields of fire that should have made escape impossible. Vextar felt the familiar surge of predatory satisfaction as his pack emerged from hiding, ready to claim their prey. Human vessels, his voice boomed across all communication frequencies. You are surrounded and outgunned. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ships and the death of your crews. The response was not what he expected. Instead of panicked surrender or desperate attempts to flee, the 3 human ships simply stopped. They hung motionless in space for a moment that stretched like eternity, as if considering their options, with calm deliberation. Then, without warning or ceremony, they began to change. The cargo hauler Lucky Strike was the first to reveal its true nature. External hull plating split apart and retracted, exposing weapon ports that had been hidden beneath false cargo bay doors. Massive gun turrets emerged from concealed mounts, their barrels swiveling toward the Krellian destroyers with mechanical precision. The ship's entire silhouette transformed as armor plating deployed and sensor arrays extended, turning what had appeared to be a harmless merchant vessel into something altogether more dangerous. What in the 7 hells? Lieutenant Scarth gasped from his station, his claws scratching frantically at his control console as sensor readings flooded his displays. But the Lucky Strike was only the beginning. The research vessel Endeavour underwent an even more dramatic transformation. Equipment pods that had appeared to contain scientific instruments split open to reveal weapon systems unlike anything in the Krellian database. Strange crystalline arrays emerged from hidden compartments, crackling with energy that made the very air around them seem to bend and twist. The ship's hull reconfigured itself as internal bulkheads moved and restructured, optimizing the vessel for combat rather than research. The passenger liner New Horizon completed the impossible revelation. Sections of its hull that had appeared to be passenger compartments fell away entirely, revealing launch bays filled with small craft. Fighter squadrons poured out like angry insects from a disturbed hive, their formation flying suggesting military training and equipment far beyond anything civilian pilots should possess. The ship's elegant curves hardened into angular surfaces designed to deflect weapons fire, while gun turrets emerged from what had been observation decks and recreational areas. Vextar stared in mounting horror as his perfect trap revealed itself to be something entirely different. These were not civilian rescue ships. These were warships, military vessels disguised with such skill and attention to detail that his sensors had been completely fooled. The humans had not stumbled into his ambush. They had planned their own. "Captain," came a calm voice over the communication system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel UES Warhammer. You are hereby charged with piracy, illegal use of human distress frequencies, and violation of Galactic Convention Article 15 regarding protected emergency channels. Surrender immediately and prepare to be taken into custody." The voice carried no anger, no surprise, no fear. It was the voice of a professional military officer who had been expecting this exact situation and was prepared to deal with it according to established procedures. Vexatar realized with growing dread that every detail of his ambush had been anticipated and planned for. "Impossible!" he snarled, his claws digging furrows in his command chair. "You are civilian vessels. Our intelligence confirmed your identities and capabilities." "Your intelligence was deliberately fed false information," Captain Chen replied with what might have been amusement. "The merchant vessel you were impersonating never existed. The distress call was bait. You have been under surveillance since you entered this sector." The implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. The humans had known about his pack's hunting activities. They had studied his tactics, learned his methods, and prepared a counter-trap that used his own strategies. Against him, the fake distress call that should have lured rescue ships to their doom had instead drawn his pack into a carefully prepared killing zone. "Sir," reported his tactical officer in a voice tight with panic, "I'm reading massive weapon signatures. From all 3 targets, their firepower ratings are off the scale. These are not destroyers or cruisers. These are capital ships." Vextar's blood ran cold as the full scope of the deception became clear. His pack of 6 destroyers, formidable against merchant vessels and lightly armed patrol craft, was now facing 3 ships that appeared to be among the most advanced warships in the human fleet. The hunting pack had become the hunted. All ships He commanded across the pack communication channel. "Prepare for immediate attack. Target their weapon systems and engines. We still outnumber them 6-3. But even as he gave the order, Vexitar could see the futility of their situation. The human ships had positioned themselves perfectly, their fields of fire overlapping, to cover all possible escape routes. The fighter squadrons from the New Horizon were already spreading out to prevent any Krellian vessel from fleeing, while the strange weapon arrays on the Endeavor continued to build energy at levels that made his sensor operators nervous. "Captain," came another transmission, this one from the research vessel. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Santos aboard the UES Prometheus. I should mention that my ship is carrying several experimental weapon systems that have never been tested in actual combat. Your pack has the honor of providing the first field trial of technologies that may revolutionize space warfare." The clinical detachment in the human scientist's voice was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. These humans were not acting from anger or desperation. They were conducting a planned military operation with the same calm professionalism they might bring to a training exercise. "Third human vessel." Vexitar tried one last desperate bluff. "You are outnumbered and surrounded. My ships are faster and more maneuverable than your heavy vessels. We can escape this trap and return with reinforcements." The response came from the passenger liner, its captain's voice carrying what sounded like genuine regret. "Captain Rodriguez here, aboard the UES Retribution. I'm afraid escape is not an option. We've been tracking your pack for weeks, studying your movement patterns and tactical preferences. Every possible escape route from this asteroid field has been calculated and covered." Vexitar's sensor displays confirmed the horrible truth. The human fighter squadrons were not randomly distributed around the battle zone. They were positioned at precise coordinates that corresponded to the gravitational slingshot routes his ships would need to use for rapid escape. The three capital ships had arranged themselves to provide overlapping fire coverage that eliminated any possibility of breaking through their formation. The trap was perfect, more perfect than anything Vexitar had ever conceived. The humans had not just anticipated his ambush tactics. They had studied every aspect of Krellian raider doctrine, mapped every possible response to their counter-trap, and prepared accordingly. His pack was not facing a hastily assembled rescue force. They were facing a carefully planned military operation that had been designed specifically to destroy them. "How long?" he asked his navigation officer, in a voice that had lost all its earlier confidence. "How long what, sir?" "How long have they been watching us? Planning this?" The navigation officer checked his logs with trembling claws. "Based on their knowledge of our movement patterns and tactical doctrine, I would estimate months of surveillance and preparation, sir. Months." The humans had been tracking his pack for months, learning their methods, studying their targets, and planning this moment. Every successful raid, every captured merchant vessel, every fake distress call had been observed and catalogued. The hunters had been stalked by more skilled predators without ever knowing it. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "I'm receiving additional transmissions from the human ships. They're broadcasting our conversation on all emergency frequencies. Other vessels in the sector will know what happened here." That was the final stroke of the trap. The humans were not just planning to destroy or capture his pack. They were going to make sure that every pirate, raider, and opportunist in known space learned exactly what happened to those who used fake distress calls against human shipping. The battle would become a message, a warning that humanity's compassion was now protected by overwhelming firepower. Vexitar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were veterans, predators who had followed him through dozens of successful raids. Now they stared at their displays in growing panic as they realized the scope of the trap they had walked into. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey they had thought so soft and vulnerable had revealed fangs sharper than their own. "All ships," he announced across the pack communication channel, knowing that the humans were probably listening to every word. "Prepare for battle. If we are to die today, we will die as warriors." But even as he spoke the words, Vextar knew they were facing something far worse than death. The humans had turned his own tactics against him with such skill and precision that escape was impossible. His pack would either be destroyed or captured, and either outcome would serve the humans' purpose of sending a message to every predator in the galaxy. The fake distress call that was supposed to exploit humanity's greatest weakness had instead revealed their greatest strength. They would not be turned from compassion by fear, but they would ensure that compassion was protected by firepower that made mercy possible. The revelation was complete. The trap had been sprung from both directions, and there was nowhere left to run. The battle lasted 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Vextar gave the attack order with the desperation of a cornered predator, knowing that his only hope lay in striking fast and hard before the human ships could bring their superior firepower to bear. 6 Krellian destroyers opened fire simultaneously, their energy weapons and missile systems unleashing everything they had at the 3 human vessels. The response was immediate and devastating. The UES Warhammer moved like nothing Vextar had ever seen. For a ship disguised as a cargo hauler, it demonstrated agility that defied physics. Point defense systems that had been hidden beneath false hull plating emerged and began intercepting incoming missiles with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Energy bolts that should have overwhelmed the ship's shields were deflected by armor plating that shimmered with some kind of adaptive technology. But the Warhammer was not content to simply defend, as Krellian weapons fire sparked harmlessly. Against its defenses, the battlecruiser returned fire with weapons that redefined Vextar's understanding of destructive capability. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed crossed the space between ships in milliseconds, striking with force that turned matter into plasma on contact. The destroyer, Fang's Edge, simply ceased to exist. One moment, it was there, firing everything it had at the human battlecruiser. The next moment, it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and metal fragments, its entire hull vaporized by impacts that released more energy than some stellar fusion reactors. "Impossible," Lieutenant Scarth gasped, watching his sensor readings, with disbelief. "No weapon should be able to accelerate projectiles to those velocities. The energy requirements alone should be beyond any ship-mounted system." But the humans were just getting started. The research vessel Prometheus demonstrated why it had been described as carrying experimental weapons. The crystalline arrays that had emerged from its hull began to glow with a light that made viewing screens automatically dim to protect optical sensors. When the strange weapons fired, they did not launch projectiles or energy beams. Instead, they seemed to reach out and touch their targets with invisible fingers that transformed matter itself. The destroyer Bloodfang found itself caught in one of these impossible weapon effects. Its shields, designed to deflect energy and absorb kinetic impacts, began to behave in ways that violated every known law of physics. The defensive barrier turned inside out, becoming a crushing field that compressed the ship's hull like an empty beverage container. Armor plating that could withstand direct nuclear strikes crumpled like paper as the vessel imploded under forces that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Captain Rodriguez aboard the Retribution proved that the passenger liner's transformation was no less dramatic than that of her sister ships. Fighter squadrons that poured from hidden launch bays moved with coordination that spoke of extensive training and advanced equipment. These were not civilian pilots pressed into emergency service. These were military aviators flying some of the most advanced small craft Vextar had ever encountered. The fighters attacked in waves, their weapons designed not just to destroy but to disable. Precision strikes took out weapon systems, engine, components, and communication arrays with surgical accuracy. The destroyer Sharpclaw found its main guns silenced one by one as human fighters danced through its defensive fire with impossible agility, their pilots demonstrating skills that bordered on supernatural. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, with mounting panic, "the enemy fighters are using some kind of predictive targeting system. They're anticipating our fire patterns and adjusting their flight paths before we even pull the triggers. Vextar watched in growing horror as his pack was systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to have anticipated every possible tactical response. The humans fought with a coordination and ruthlessness that shattered every assumption he had held about their supposed softness. These were not the compassionate rescuers his intelligence reports had described. These were predators, hunters who had perfected the art of warfare to a degree that made his own raiders look like amateurs. The destroyer Night Stalker attempted to break away from the battle, its captain recognizing that escape was the only hope for survival. The ship's engines flared to maximum power as it tried to reach one of the asteroid field's gravitational slingshot points for rapid acceleration. It never made it past the first major asteroid. The human fighters had been waiting. As Night Stalker rounded the massive rock formation, it found itself facing a carefully prepared ambush that mirrored the trap Vexatar's pack had tried to spring on the human ships. Missiles emerged from concealed positions among the asteroids, fired from fighter craft that had been lying in wait for exactly this escape attempt. The Krellian destroyer's point defense systems, already damaged by previous fighter attacks, could not handle the coordinated missile barrage. Explosions walked along the ship's hull like deadly footsteps, each detonation opening new breaches in armor that had been weakened by sustained weapons fire. The ship's death was not quick, but it was inevitable. They planned for everything, Vextar realized with dawning horror. Every escape route, every tactical response, every possible move we might make. They've been studying us for months. The remaining 3 destroyers of his pack tried to form a defensive formation, concentrating their fire on the Warhammer in hope of overwhelming at least one of the human ships. Their combined firepower should have been sufficient to damage even a capital ship, but the human battlecruiser seemed to absorb their attacks with contemptuous ease. The secret became apparent when Vextar's sensors finally penetrated the ship's defensive systems enough to analyze its armor composition. The Warhammer was not just protected by advanced defensive technology. Its entire hull had been constructed using materials and techniques that were decades ahead of anything in the Krellian database. This was not simply a disguised warship. This was a demonstration of technological superiority that reduced his pack's weapons to the equivalent of throwing rocks at a fortress. The destroyer Silent Death made a desperate attempt to ram the Prometheus, its captain apparently deciding that suicide was preferable to capture or slow destruction. The research vessel's response demonstrated another example of human technological advancement. Instead of trying to evade the ramming attack, the Prometheus simply made the attacking ship disappear. The weapon effect was unlike anything Vextar had ever seen. Space around the Silent Death seemed to fold in on itself, creating distortions that made optical tracking impossible. When the distortion field collapsed, there was nothing left where the Krellian destroyer had been. No wreckage, no energy signature, no trace that the ship had ever existed. Spatial manipulation technology, the science officer reported in a voice tight with fear. They're using controlled gravitational fields to create localized space-time distortions. The theoretical energy requirements should be impossible for any ship-mounted system. Impossible or not, the technology was real and devastatingly effective. The humans had not just anticipated the pirates' tactics. They had brought weapons that operated on principles the Krellian raiders could barely understand, much less counter. The destroyer Bone Crusher found itself targeted by multiple human weapon systems simultaneously. The Warhammer's kinetic projectiles shattered its forward armor, while the Prometheus's exotic weapons twisted its hull into configurations that made structural integrity impossible. Fighter squadrons from the Retribution delivered precision strikes that severed critical system connections, leaving the ship dead in space. Captain Vextar watched his pack die with the stunned disbelief of a predator who had suddenly discovered himself at the bottom of the food chain. These humans fought with a clinical precision that was somehow more terrifying than any display of anger or revenge would have been. They were not acting from emotion. They were executing a carefully planned military operation designed to send a message that would echo throughout the galaxy. "Sir," Lieutenant Scarth reported with trembling claws, "the Blood Claw is the only ship still operational. All other vessels are either destroyed or disabled. We have sustained critical damage to engines and weapon systems." Vexatar looked around his bridge at the faces of his surviving crew. These veterans who had followed him through dozens of successful raids now stared at their displays in shock and disbelief. The hunters had been hunted by predators so skilled that resistance seemed pointless. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," the communications officer announced. Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional despite the devastating battle that had just concluded. "Captain Vextar, your remaining ship is disabled and surrounded. Your pack has been neutralized. I am offering you one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. You have 30 seconds to respond before we complete our mission." The threat was clear and undeniable. The humans had demonstrated technological and tactical superiority that made further resistance suicidal. But more than that, they had shown a level of preparation and planning that suggested this entire operation had been designed not just to destroy his pack, but to create an example that other pirates would remember. Vextar realized that he had become part of a message. The fake distress call that was supposed to exploit humanity's compassion had instead triggered a response that would fundamentally change how predators viewed human shipping. The galaxies. Raiders would learn that using human kindness as a weapon would be met with overwhelming retaliation. The 7 minutes of battle had been enough to demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength was not their compassion, but their ability to protect that compassion with firepower that made mercy possible. The aftermath came swiftly and with devastating thoroughness. Within 6 hours of the battle's conclusion, recordings of the engagement were spreading across the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. The footage had been carefully edited and enhanced by Earth Defense Force intelligence specialists, ensuring that every detail of the Krellian Pack's destruction was captured in perfect clarity. Pirates, raiders, and smugglers throughout known space watched in growing alarm as 6 experienced destroyers were systematically annihilated by 3 ships they had believed to be helpless civilian vessels. In the notorious pirate haven of Tortuga Station, Captain Marcus Webb paused his recruitment efforts as the battle recordings played on screens throughout the asteroid base's cantinas and meeting halls. Webb had been planning his own operation against human shipping, confident that merchant vessels made easy targets for his fast attack craft. The images of Krellian destroyers being reduced to expanding clouds of plasma made him reconsider those plans with uncomfortable urgency. "Look at that weapons technology," muttered his first mate, a grizzled veteran named Torres, who had raided alongside Webb for over a decade. "Those kinetic rounds are moving at relativistic speeds. No pirate ship in the galaxy has armor that could stop that kind of firepower." Webb nodded grimly, watching as the human research vessel demonstrated weapons that seemed to violate basic physics. The spatial distortion effects that had simply erased the silent death were beyond anything in his experience or imagination. If the humans had deployed such technology on what appeared to be standard patrol vessels, what other surprises might be waiting in their military arsenal? The recording spread through every criminal network, black market communication hub, and smuggler's den in the sector. Independent pirates who had never worked together began sharing intelligence and tactical analysis, trying to understand how humanity had managed such a complete tactical reversal. The consensus was deeply disturbing. The humans had been studying pirate operations for months, possibly years, learning their methods and preparing countermeasures with methodical precision. On the mining world of Kepler 7, Administrator Sarah, Kim received the battle recordings along with an encrypted message from Earth Defense Command. The message was brief and to the point. "The protection of human shipping lanes is now guaranteed by advanced military assets operating under civilian cover. All merchant vessels should continue normal operations with confidence." Kim had been considering suspending mining operations due to increased pirate activity in the sector. The Krellian raids had made transport too dangerous and expensive for profitable extraction operations. But the demonstration of military capability changed everything. If Earth could deploy such overwhelming force to protect its shipping, then the mining colonies could continue their work without fear of constant attacks. The economic implications rippled outward almost as quickly as the military ones. Insurance rates for ships traveling through human space dropped dramatically as underwriters realized that the protection was far more comprehensive than anyone had imagined. Trade routes that had been considered too dangerous for commercial traffic suddenly became viable again, opening new markets and opportunities throughout the frontier regions. Admiral Rebecca Torres reviewed the operation's results from her command center on Luna Station, satisfied with the strategic impact of the carefully planned engagement. The 3 ships of Operation Shepherd's Crook had exceeded all expectations, demonstrating not just tactical superiority, but the kind of technological advancement that would make potential enemies reconsider their assumptions about human military capability. Intelligence reports are coming in from across the sector, reported Colonel Martinez, her chief of staff. Pirate activity has dropped by 78% in the 2 weeks since the engagement. Several major raider groups have relocated their operations to systems far from human trade routes. Torres nodded, studying the strategic analysis displays that showed shipping lane security improving dramatically across a region that encompassed dozens of star systems. The operation had achieved its primary objective of protecting human merchant traffic, but the secondary effects were proving even more valuable. "What about the survivor interviews?" she asked. "Captain Vextar and his remaining crew have been very cooperative," Martinez replied with what might have been amusement. "They've provided detailed intelligence about pirate networks, operational methods, and planned targets. It seems the demonstration of our capabilities made quite an impression." The Krellian captain had surrendered unconditionally after witnessing the destruction of his pack, and his subsequent debriefing had revealed the scope of organized piracy throughout the sector. Earth Defense Intelligence was using that information to identify and track other raider groups, preparing similar operations that would eliminate threats before they could strike. But the real victory was not measured in ships destroyed or pirates captured. The battle recordings had fundamentally changed how potential enemies viewed human military capabilities. For years, humanity had been seen as a soft species that relied on diplomacy and trade rather than military strength. The revelation that human civilian vessels could carry such devastating firepower forced a complete reassessment of those assumptions. On the frontier world of New Carthage, Governor Elena Rodriguez watched the battle recordings with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Her world had suffered 3 pirate raids in the past year, attacks that had killed dozens of colonists and set back development efforts by months. The knowledge that Earth could deploy such overwhelming protective force was reassuring, but it also raised questions about what other capabilities might be hidden within apparently civilian infrastructure. "How many ships like these does Earth have?" asked her security chief, Commander Park, voicing the question that was being asked throughout. "The galaxy. That's classified above our access level," Rodriguez replied, "but I suspect the answer would surprise us. This operation demonstrates a level of long-term planning and technological development that suggests Earth has been preparing for scenarios we never imagined. The implications extended far beyond piracy suppression. If Earth could disguise advanced warships as civilian vessels so effectively that even experienced raiders were completely fooled, what other military assets might be hidden throughout human space? The revelation forced potential enemies to reconsider every interaction with human ships, wondering if that innocent-looking cargo hauler might actually be a battlecruiser in disguise. The psychological impact proved as important as the tactical demonstration. Pirate captains who had built their reputations on successfully targeting human shipping found themselves questioning their intelligence sources and operational assumptions. The comfortable certainty that humans were soft targets had been shattered, replaced by the disturbing possibility that any human ship might be carrying enough firepower to level a small fleet. 3 months after the battle, shipping through human space had increased by 40% as merchants and manufacturers took advantage of newly secured trade routes. The economic benefits cascaded through multiple sectors, from raw material extraction to finished goods manufacturing. Colonies that had been struggling to maintain supply lines suddenly found themselves with reliable access to everything from medical supplies to advanced technology. The operation's success led to the expansion of the Shepherd's Crook program. Additional ships were converted to the dual-role configuration, creating a hidden fleet of protective assets that could respond to threats while maintaining the appearance of civilian traffic. The program represented a new approach to space security, one that used humanity's reputation for peaceful commerce as the perfect cover for military preparedness. Dr. Elizabeth Santos published a classified report on the experimental weapon systems used during the engagement, documenting their performance and recommending improvements for future deployments. The spatial manipulation technology had exceeded all theoretical projections, suggesting that human physics research was decades ahead of what most alien species had achieved. The enemy's tactical doctrine assumed limitations that no longer apply to human military technology, she wrote in her conclusion. Our ability to exceed their technological expectations was as important as our firepower superiority. Future operations should continue to leverage this advantage through the deployment of capabilities that enemy forces cannot predict or counter. The message spread through diplomatic channels as well as criminal networks. Alien governments that had viewed humanity as a junior partner in galactic affairs began reassessing their relationships with Earth. If humans could hide such advanced military capabilities behind civilian facades, what other surprises might they be concealing? The Krellian hegemony issued a formal apology for the actions of the Raider Pack, along with promises to police their space more effectively to prevent similar incidents. Other species that had traditionally ignored piracy against human targets suddenly became much more interested in cooperative security arrangements. Captain Sarah Chen received the Navy Cross for her role in planning and executing the operation, but she took greater satisfaction in the intelligence reports that showed her success protecting lives rather than taking them. The fake distress call that was meant to exploit human compassion had instead demonstrated humanity's determination to protect that compassion through overwhelming preparation and firepower. The battle recordings continued to circulate for years afterward, serving as both warning and promise. To those who might threaten human shipping, they demonstrated the futility of using humanity's kindness against them. To human colonists and merchants, they proved that Earth's protection extended far beyond its official military presence. The galaxy had learned a fundamental lesson about humanity. They would not be turned from compassion by fear, but they would ensure that compassion was protected by firepower that made mercy possible. The fake distress call had backfired completely, revealing not human weakness, but human strength disguised as vulnerability. Earth's message was clear and unambiguous. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their tactics, but their refusal to let the galaxy's predators transform kindness into a liability. They would continue to answer distress calls and rush to aid strangers in need, but they would do so with the confidence that came from knowing their compassion was backed by the most advanced military force in known space.